Welcome everyone I am Tobeka Hadebe. I hold the Education and Development Portfolio with Santon BMF. Welcome to our last Meet the Author series, which is dedicated to women. We began this month in conversation with the author of the book, Boardroom Dancing, Nolita Fagude, and expanded on her book, which is a memoir of her journey as a business leader and advocate for transformation in corporate South Africa. Today, we have Carice, whose book provides a guide for Black professionals to thrive in the workplace. I will now just hand over to the chairperson of YP BMF, Santon, who will introduce Carice.
Thank you, Tobeka. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayanda Masina. I am the current chairperson of the Young Professionals in the Santon branch. My job is easy today. I'm going to introduce our author. I hope I do her justice. This is quite an amazing bio, actually. So Carice Anderson, she wrote the book, Intelligence Isn't Enough. But I mean, that's how I got to know her or of her. But I'm just gonna give you some background as to who she is. So she holds an MBA, which she got from Harvard University. And she's worked with a couple of top companies around South Africa, around the globe. Such companies like Deloitte, Google, the Ellen Gray Orbis Foundation, and Bain and Company. At McKinsey and Company, Carice managed a leadership development program for Black professionals. And she's currently doing executive training, consulting, and facilitation for top firms. With an experience of over 17 years. Wow, that's a long time. Over 17 years with a couple of top companies in South Africa and globally, Carice Anderson is a professional development manager. And she has then graciously written a book, basically sharing her knowledge and her insider knowledge, actually, and also shed a bit of light on the harsh realities that we experience as young professionals in the corporate environment. Today's conversation is basically going to be a bit about the book and some of her experiences, where she basically speaks to how young professionals struggle earlier on in their careers because they lack the necessary soft skills which are required to successfully navigate the work environment. And with that amazing bio, I would like to introduce Carice Anderson, and Tobeka, lead us into this conversation. Thank you.
Welcome, Carice.
Thank you, Tobeka, and thank you, Ayanda, for introducing me. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to be here. Good afternoon to all of you.
And good morning to you. I believe it's 6 o'clock right now where you are.
It is.
Yes. And
that's,
so
that's how much I love you all, though, right? To get up this early in the morning.
Carice, before we dive into the book, I just want to just share just a little bit on you. I was a fangirl of you from about 2012 because that's when I started my hair journey as a relaxed hair girl, and you speak on how to grow your hair, and you've got a business on that. I remember even I was living in Durban, flying to Johannesburg in Feb 2014 for like the hair indaba where I got to meet you for the first time. So when I saw a friend posting about your book, I was like very impressed. Like, I just thought you were a businesswoman, but you're also in corporate, and I know that you're married and you've got kids. Like, how do you juggle that all?
Well, let me just clarify. I don't have any children. I don't want to lead you. No, it's fine. I didn't want you guys to think that I was doing more than I actually am. And I tip my hat to all the parents out there. I think it's the hardest but most rewarding job out there. I think for me, in terms of juggling, and it's funny you asked me this because I was actually thinking about this last night. I think it's two things actually for me. I think I'm able to, in a really, serious way, I'm able to block out distractions. And sometimes that can be a negative thing too, because I can, not pay attention to things that I should be paying attention to. But when I have a deadline, I have a laser-like focus and I can just focus on that one thing. I think the second thing is I do have a very high, I think I saw it in a personality assessment. I just have a very high degree of persistence and results agility. Like if you give me a task, I'm going to move heaven and hell to get it done. And that's, not that I don't have other areas I need to work on, but those two things, I think honestly allow me to achieve everything. And they allowed me to even finish this book last year. I mean, I finished the book, I finished editing my book and even finalizing my manuscript last year. And I was working a very demanding job at the time, and I could only work on my book on weekends. And I just was like, okay, Carice, we got to meet this deadline, so remove all the distractions. And I'll even get into, this is how granular I think about this. Like, I will get distracted playing in my hair. So I started covering my hair up. So I couldn't play with it. I will get distracted if I have to get up and get like some lippy or some, lotion. So I was like, I put the lotion and the lippy there. I was like, you have no reason to get up, Carice. Even the music I listened to while I was writing, I was like, don't put on music that you like. Put on like, because next thing you know, you're going to be dancing in the chair and you're not going to be writing. So I was like, I put on, classical music that doesn't distract me, right? So I put on like classical music or jazz, something that I can't sing along to. So, and I tell people that all the time. I'm like, you have to figure out what your distractions are. I put the phone in the other room. So figuring out whatever your distractions are and then putting some sort of intervention in place so that you're not distracted by those things if it is possible.
I love that. Essentially, it's the concept of knowing yourself, which you speak on in the book. And so before I get into that, what I noticed is, and there are 5 elements, according to the psychologist Daniel Goleman, to emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And it was incredible for me to see that you actually incorporated all of that in your book. However, you used like 3 pointers. Can you just speak on that? And then we'll jump back to the first one. Yeah.
So, I mean, for those of you that haven't had the chance to, read my book, I've organized my book according to a framework. So I'm basically saying, in order to truly have impact and to be successful, you need to know yourself, you need to know other people, you need to know your environment. Then you integrate the knowledge of those 3 to build a personal brand and a communication style that allows you to have maximum impact. And I think for me, a lot of that just came from my career and thinking about, where did I fall down? Where did I fall short? And it was really across those 5 areas. It was either the fact that I didn't know myself, which you sort of alluded to, which I think is honestly a lifelong process because, we evolve and things happen in life, right? I didn't understand other people and what motivated them and what they were trying to achieve. I didn't take into account that sometimes people don't make decisions based off of logic. Sometimes people are making decisions off of emotions and fear. I did not understand the environments I was working in. To the third part, I just, I walked in there and thought, well, okay, this doesn't work and this doesn't work. I'm going to try to fix this at company XYZ, and then I think because of, my lack of understanding in those 3 areas, I didn't know how to present myself from a branding perspective. And I didn't know how to communicate in a way that worked in that environment, because what, works in one environment, the communication style that works in one environment may not work in another. So and that's why, I've structured my book in that way, because I feel like if you all can begin to master those 5 areas, in addition to being smart and working hard, I don't want to discount those things, but I think sometimes we rely on those 2 too much. And we think that's all it's going to take for us to be successful. So you still got to work hard, because anybody that's successful works hard, but I wanted to kind of add to the formula as opposed to hard work and intelligence being the only 2 things that make you successful.
Awesome. So in terms of knowing ourselves, like the concept of finding yourself is quite a common thing lately. But actually, how does one even begin? You mentioned that you took a personality test. So are there only other tools and tips that you have, especially in application to the workplace? And how does one use that for personal branding, which I knew it as something for entertainers and perhaps business people? Is it the way you also dress, or is it linked to your personality? How does one build one from knowing themselves?
So this is a tip, you all, that doesn't cost you any money, and you can start doing this today. Go home today, or if you're already at home, pull out a piece of paper and just write down the critical moments, people, situations in your, starting from as far back as you can remember. And you will start to uncover who you are, right? Because you're the people that have been in your life, the situations in which you found yourself or that other people have put you in, have shaped you into who you are today. And that's why I think, that's a really critical exercise for you to do. I mean, I think I probably didn't do that until I was probably 28, 29 years old. I was in business school and I took this class called Self-Assessment and Career Development. And one of the assignments was, reflect back on your life and think about the critical decisions that you've made and what drove those decisions. And that was the first time I'd ever reflected on my life. I had never looked back. It was just always, okay, on to the next thing, on to the next achievement, on to the next job. And what I realized is a lot of my decisions were driven by money. I had made a lot of decisions because I did not want to go home and live with my parents. I love them to death. They are great people. They just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. They're amazing, but I did not want to go home and live with them. And so what was driving a lot of my decisions was, okay, who's going to pay me enough money so I don't have to go home and live with my parents? And I wasn't really thinking about, do I like this job? Is this job aligned to my purpose, my personality, my strengths, what motivates me? None of that. It was kind of like I was putting myself on the auction block and I was going to the highest bidder. So those are the sorts of insights that you will only get if you reflect back. If you think about personalities at work that upset you, why is it that those types of people upset you? Do they remind you of someone from the past? Do they violate or somehow offend a certain value that you have? All of these things are important for you to know about yourself. It's important for you to know, what is it that I value? What are my strengths? What are my areas of development? What are some unhealed traumas that I actually have that I'm bringing to work? What are some of the lessons that I've learned? I talk a little bit in my book about this, just gender roles. I grew up in a family that was, let's say patriarchal, to put it nicely, right? Also known as sexist. The women do all the cooking and the cleaning and the men, chill on Thanksgiving or Christmas. And so when I took that attitude into work, and so when I saw things that were happening that were unfair, I didn't really think anything about it because that's how I had been raised. And you just learn to accept those things. And so that's why I'm saying we have to reflect. And I'll just say one other point on this, Tobeka. Even this idea, like, I think as a woman, sometimes we're raised to just take one for the team. And that kind of goes along with growing up in that patriarchy, right? You're just told, like, hey, that's just how it is. And so a lot of times I think early in my career, I took opportunities just in the spirit of taking one for the team. And it wasn't necessarily the best opportunity for me. So that's what I'm saying about really reflecting on how you've grown up, the messages you've gotten, how you've been socialized, what you've been told you can and cannot do because you are Black, female, whatever it is, because you are poor. All of because we bring all that stuff to work. We don't show up at work as a brand new person with no history. We bring all that history with us, and we have to reflect to see how it's impacting us and how we show up, how we interact with other people, and how we look at the environments that we're working in.
I can certainly relate to that. Taking on a job because there was pressure. My first career was as a lawyer. Then I did like a complete rebel, find myself. But I do consider, when I look back, I was privileged enough to be able to go out and find myself, to eventually where I'm at now and completely happy back in corporate, using my legal degree, but in a different space. But right now, we are in a season where people are desperate for jobs and they feel like they should settle in their workplace. And as you mentioned, the importance of finding your purpose, finding a company culture that also speaks to your own culture. But right now, people are, like you're saying, they're just looking for a job that they can get paid. What advice would you give to young professionals or just professionals right now, like in how to navigate in this season?
So I'm a realist, right? And I understand that people have bills. We might have student loans we need to pay. You know, we've got to help with our sister's school fees. We have responsibilities. So sometimes we might have to take a job that doesn't fully align to our purpose and our passion so that we can keep the lights on and we can continue to pay ESCOM, right? Um, sometimes that's just the reality. But I think, you know, what I want us to think about too is like, okay, I understand why I'm taking this job. I understand it might not be the best fit for me, but it's going to help me be able to meet my financial obligations. And you go to work with that attitude. That's your why. I talk about finding your why in my book. So maybe for you, that's the why. I need to do this for right now. But then I think also in the back of your mind, in your free time, on the weekends, thinking about, okay, what could be my next move that could be a better fit for me? I'm still going to give 100% at the job that I'm at because it's keeping those lights on. And I recognize that. But I'm going to be on the side thinking about what could be a better fit. I'm going to update my CV. I'm going to network with people. I'm going to be on LinkedIn looking for other opportunities that could be a better fit for me. And maybe spending some of that time, going back to your previous question, understanding what is my why? What is my story? What are my values and my strengths so that you can make a really informed decision when the opportunity arises? Because you don't want to go from one bad situation to another. And you don't just want to run from the current job. You want to run towards something that's a good fit for you when, you know, you get a little bit of breathing room from a financial perspective.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the book when you spoke about instead of running away from running towards something that personally hit me deep. But now, okay, so we find that the company which we believe has got that corporate culture, company culture that we feel we align to, but the same way we don't choose our parents and our siblings, we don't necessarily always choose our managers, colleagues, and even sometimes the teams. Yes, you interview someone, but you don't know who is this person that is really coming in. What tools can you give to build relationships at work and manage conflict, especially when there are just people you don't like? It just happens. It's normal. I think it's natural. Just the way someone speaks can be irritating.
Absolutely. No, I totally get that. And I think for me, what has been helpful or what I wish I had maybe done in previous jobs when I didn't get along with people was I needed to check myself and ask myself, and this is once again why it's so important for us to know ourselves and to know the messages that we've gotten, because that informs our values. So for me personally, I grew up in a family where, you know, intellect and degrees are everything. Nobody ever talked about soft skills and learning how to get along with people or build relationships. It was like, get those degrees, be smart, and you will be successful. And so my attitude based off of those messages was none of this other stuff matters. It doesn't matter how good of a relationship builder you are. So when I had a manager that was not good at the things that I valued, I was judgmental of her. And that did not create or foster a really positive environment for us to have a good relationship. And so I think sometimes we do need to check ourselves in terms of what is it that I believe is most important? And what is it about this person that is irritating me? And I will say for me, that manager, you know, I'm a person, I'm very I'm a very strategic thinker, and I'm very big on execution. I want things to be done in a smart way. I want things to be well thought out and well executed. And she struggled with all three of those. And so I looked at her, and I'm sure she felt my judgment. Even if I didn't say anything, even if I was totally professional and respectful, she felt that judgment. And our relationship was like this the whole time. If I could go back in time, I wish I could have looked at her and said to myself, okay, she doesn't bring what I bring. And if you think about it, that makes sense. That's why we need each other. Because if she brings the same thing I bring, then there's going to be things that are missing. You know what I mean? In that relationship, in that interaction, in how we make decisions. So I should have said to myself, let me value her for what she brings. Let me try to learn from her on what it is that she brings to the table. And I think it could have made our relationship 1,000 times better if if I took that posture, if I approached her with that spirit, as opposed to a spirit of, this lady should not have this job. That, because that was the spirit with which I was approaching her. So I think for me, it's just trying to figure out, what is the source of the clash? Is it something superficial, like you said, the sound of someone's voice, or is it something substantive? And is there some role that your own personal values or judgment is playing in how you're looking at that person? And if you need to sort of humble yourself and take a step back and approach that person in a different way. I think, valuing what people bring to the table, acknowledging what they bring, and trying to learn from them, I think that helps. Because sometimes this is what we do. We come in with our fancy degrees from our fancy schools, and we turn our noses up at everybody who doesn't necessarily have that. But maybe they're great, like I said, at building relationships. They have, connections with senior people in the organization. They understand how to get things done and how that culture works. Find something to respect about that person. Is really critical.
And just on that, I'm just reminded on the I'm not trying to tell everyone your entire book now.
It's okay.
But when you spoke on the differences from when you actually have that kind of relationship, if you had actually spent the time and built the relationship with your manager or colleagues and team, how you then view each other and each other's work. I'm just going to let you kind of just touch on that. I like the illustration that you had in your book.
I'm trying to remember which illustration is this. If you remind me.
It's okay. I will just say it. Well, for me, when I read it, reflecting back on, I could have done this differently. Like when you come out of university, you never really have a relationship with your professors or your lecturers or people like that. So you start off the workplace with that kind of a mindset. You don't actually invest in developing, or we're not taught as Black professionals initially to invest in developing those relationships. So when I submit a draft or a piece of work, and they don't have a relationship with me, they are just judging me solely on the work that I submit, versus if I have a relationship with the person, they are judging me on who I am and will be like, you know what, Tobega, I'm sure Tobega tried. Let me actually spend time in investing in her. So that sort of stuck with me, and I could see the difference between where I'm at now in a team where we are intentional about building relationships versus the past. And I was just like, I can see where the disconnects can come in. But just speaking just a bit more on building relationships in the workplace, I was fascinated by a quote from Jocelyn Mahuti Remy when she said, with empathy, you can reach anyone. Now, I'm generally the kind of person that I just like to get the job done. So this building relationship has been hard for me. So you then also said that you can build and develop empathy. How, Carice? Someone like me who's just been taught, just do what you need. Don't care really about the next person. How do we do that in this space? Because you're not my best friend. You're not my partner. Yeah, so how do we use empathy in the workplace?
And Tobeka, this goes, I'm gonna keep going back to the same stuff. Y'all are gonna get tired of me, but this goes back to what I was saying in terms of understanding what messages have you been given growing up. So I think a lot of us have been taught, you go to work, you put your head down, you work hard, and somebody will come and tap you on the shoulder as the chosen one, right? We've also been told, don't trust the people at work, don't tell them your business because they'll probably, use it against you. So we have this wall up from a relationship and a trust standpoint. And then couple that with who we probably naturally are. Tobeka, I'm just like you. I'm all about, let's get this work done and then let's go home. But I had to realize, and there's a quote in my book by this guy named Shaka Booker. And he talks about how you're not just working and managing people, you're managing how people feel about the work. So if you're always just approaching people with your logic, you're going to miss it probably 50% of the time in terms of hitting the mark with that individual. Whether it's someone that that you're leading or that you're working with. And so we just have to remember different people approach things differently. Everybody's not like us. And it took me a while to realize that too, because I'm like, isn't everyone logical? Doesn't everyone want to execute at a high level? No, some people don't care about that. Some people are not logical. Some people are not rational. And so as leaders, we have to learn how to lead different kinds of people. And so I think a lot of that starts with the empathy. When you go into an environment, I think a lot of us, and I've definitely been guilty of this, you go into an environment acting like you know everything, as opposed to go into it with a sense of curiosity. Ask people, hey, what do you do? And how do you do what you do? And I see that you've had this particular path in this organization. How did you achieve those things? How did you get to where you are? What are the things that are keeping you up at night? How do you like to be communicated with? How does what I'm doing fit in with what you're doing? All of these kinds of questions are really, really important if you want to get to know somebody. And when I talk about a relationship at work, I'm not necessarily saying it has to be a relationship like the one you have with your partner or with your mother or your sibling, but I'm saying we have to know each other beyond just, okay, Tobeka is responsible for this spreadsheet and I'm responsible for this Microsoft Word document. We've got to know each other beyond that, because if we don't, then we won't know how to communicate well with each other. We won't know when we're stepping on each other's values, when we won't know how to resolve that conflict. So that's why it's important that we know each other. And, we don't have to share our deepest, darkest secrets and traumas with the people at work, but they need to know something about you outside of the fact that you are responsible for X, Y, and Z. I think that's really, really important because, like I said, people are coming at things from different positions. And so we have to know how to appeal to people, how to influence people, based on what's important to them. And that's actually a leadership skill, being able to influence people, because the higher up you go, that's a lot of what you're doing is influencing. And so it starts with knowing who people are, because the more I know who you are, the better I know how to influence you. If I don't know who you are, I'm just kind of spraying and praying and hoping that, something I'm saying is going to hit. But if I know going in, Tobeka is motivated by, doing excellent work and high quality execution and logic, then I can appeal to her on those three things. But if I don't know who she is and what's important to her and what she's trying to achieve, I'm going to struggle. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. We have a raised hand, Pumi Maswobu. So I'm just going to allow her to ask her question. You can unmute yourself, Pumi. Okay, we'll circle back to Pumi. Kanya Mbata has a question.
Hello, ladies, and hello to everyone who's joined this forum. Thank you so much for having this platform. It's my first time joining such a session, and I'd like to particularly be to speak about the point that is raised before this one, where you spoke about not being able to choose teams and bosses, and how do you then navigate where you'd feel like you're a bit intellectually, an intellectual snob or slob compared to the other people. I recently joined an organization where when I got here, it was a bit of a shock. Imposter syndrome kicked and threw me on the floor. But when we kind of like stabilized, I sat back and I could not believe the kind of situation I'd found myself. In the sense that Carice is speaking, is that I was judging the people, because from an industrial perspective, you get to a place, I am expecting that this person would know this person would know that. And I was on the verge of resigning yesterday. I was like, no, my guy, this is actually not going to work. I swear. And so this discussion is taking me back to breathe a bit and to really try and foster that relationship and kind of like find a way to gauge how people work. But it's also part of my mandate to introduce best practice standards. We are definitely not there as an organization, but I must admit that so I need to work on sitting down with people, the entire team, just kind of understand what works with them and just shine a light as to what exactly the rest of the industry, how they work, and that this is what you should do for the entire team and the organization to be at the same level, in my view, as the rest of the industry. Okay, I'm in mining, so I always refer to the industry, to the rest of the mining industry. So yeah, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks again. I'll be reading your book. It's actually sitting on my bed.
Oh,
I didn't have a chance to read it, but yeah, thanks again.
Kanya, thank you so much for your comment. I just want to highlight something from what you've said, because look, we have a lot of expectations when we go into work, right? Because we've been told, especially as Black people, you got to be excellent. You got to be on top of your stuff. You got to have your technical skills together. You got to have that know-how. And so we have built up in our minds, like, well, everybody around me will have that same level of skill and that same level of know-how. And it's not always the case. And I say this explicitly in my book for this very reason. I say you may have a manager that you are smarter than. From an IQ, from a technical skills perspective, it's very possible. But I think trying to understand, okay, what does this person bring? Because the thing is, Kanya, you could have that idea, but maybe you need the support of those people around the table to help sell the idea to the rest of the organization. And that's where their skills and their strengths come in, is they've got those relationships with senior leaders, people who are decision makers and influencers. And so you need their help to sell the idea. Because you can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't sell it, if you can't influence people to believe in it, it goes nowhere. So also think about it from that perspective. What do the other people around the table bring? And make sure you really tap into that, try to understand that. And then I think that will give you, and appreciate it. Don't just understand it, but appreciate it, leverage it. And when people feel like, okay, Kanya is acknowledging what I bring to the table, hey, I'm more than happy to buy into her ideas or to help her make this idea better or to sell this idea in the organization. So I think this is a quote from someone famous and dead, but it is something to the effect of, we have to seek to understand before being understood. I think that's really critical in our relationships at work. We got to understand who people are and what they bring and make sure we really embrace and leverage that. And I promise you, they'll move heaven and earth for you if you do that.
Thanks, Kanya. Kanya mentioned something, imposter syndrome. So also on the other side of the spectrum, I was having a conversation with my sister, who's 5 years younger than me, in her intern years, and I couldn't believe, how is she still feeling like this? She's in one of the top global firms, yet, and then she also has this fear of failure. like this burden, like she's carrying, you know, all Black women in South Africa and Africa, like, you know, she's representing everyone. And yet, like, it baffled me that this is where we still are. Like, how would you
Mm,
advise someone like that on how to just overcome the fear of failure and
mm,
imposter syndrome, even though they've earned their place?
right. So for those of you that are on the phone that are on the call that may not be familiar with imposter syndrome, I just would like to level set. What does it actually even mean? So there's really two elements to imposter syndrome. The first one is you feel like a fraud. You always worry that you're going to be discovered. That's number one. And then the next part of imposter syndrome is that you externalize your successes. So when somebody says, "Oh, Ayanda, you know, you did so well in that presentation," it's like, "Oh, I just got lucky," or "Anyone could have done it." "Oh, I was just in the right place at the right time." "Oh, you're just being nice." So you constantly are minimizing your success, right? So those are really the two elements of imposter syndrome. Where it really comes from is a couple of places, right? I think once again, I'm going to go back to what I was saying before. What are the messages you've gotten growing up? You know what I mean? Were you always compared to your sibling, or were you, just given these messages that made you feel less than, like you didn't deserve some of these opportunities that you got? I think, um, if your parents held you to a super high standard, you never felt like you were able to meet your parents' expectations. Your grades were never good enough, right? All of these kinds of messages. I think the environment, I think especially as Black people, especially as Black people who've grown up in, a racist environment, right? You get a lot of messages that tell you that you're not good enough. You're constantly being told, whether it's people's comments, what you see in the media, the newspaper, television, you're constantly being questioned, and undermined, right? That plays psychologically. Then I think, okay, so that's what we bring into these environments before we've even stepped into them, right? Then you go into the environment and you don't see a lot of people who look like you in leadership. You go into teams, you go into meetings, you're the only woman, you're the only Black person. That also plays on you, right? And you just see that discrimination. You see that we're not getting a fair shot. We're not getting that opportunity. And so all of this stuff is what I think is causing that imposter syndrome. And I would also say maybe, another piece is, we get these messages like you got to work twice as hard to get half as much. So all of these things I think are playing into that imposter syndrome. And one of the things I've started trying to, really think about, first of all, I think you got to like acknowledge those feelings and those thoughts, is just to say like, hey, I'm feeling this way, as opposed to just trying to ignore it or trying to, push through, right? I think we also have to ask ourselves, am I holding myself to an impossible standard? And reframing and really challenging our thoughts. So if you get a job, let's say you get this really big, important job and you're like, oh my goodness, why did they give me this job? It's like sometimes we need to trust other people's opinions more than our own. Because I seriously doubt that company is in the business of giving jobs to people who they know will not be successful. It will be a total waste of their time and yours and the organization's time, right? So sometimes I think we have to believe in what other people say about us, or to challenge some of our thoughts. Like, for you to say, oh, I don't deserve this job. It's like, okay, Tobeka, but I was top of my class. I graduated with, 35 distinctions. You know what I mean? I performed really well in this interview. Why wouldn't I get the job? You know what I mean? So I think we have to not allow our emotions to let us spiral. We got to start challenging ourselves. It's like if I had to go to a court of law and prove that I didn't deserve this job, what evidence would I bring to the court to make that judge believe that I didn't deserve this job? And I just want to real quickly, just outline what are like the 5 types of imposter syndrome, in case you're wondering, like, do I have this? So I'll say, so the first one is the perfectionist. That's somebody who feels like I have to do everything at 150%. Everything has to be flawless. It's all about how it's done. The expert is the person who believes, how much I need to think about how much I know, what can I do, right? You got to know it all. You got to know it all. There's no room for not knowing. Then there's the third persona, which is the soloist. So this is somebody that feels like I must do everything on my own. If I have to ask for help, that's a sign of weakness. The fourth one is the natural genius. This is somebody who believes I have to do everything with ease and speed. I have to do it perfectly on my first attempt. If I struggle or if I'm slow, that's going to cause shame. And then the last one is just the superwoman, superman. So you feel like I have to be able to juggle 55 things easily and perfectly. And so if you're not able to juggle all these different things at once, you feel like a failure. And so just my final comment on this is I think we sometimes need to look at what is our rule book for competence? What does it mean to be a competent person? Because sometimes I think we have unreasonable standards in our head. We feel like, oh, I got to be perfect. It's got to be done flawlessly. I can't ask for help. I got to know everything. There is no person on the planet that knows everything. So we are comparing ourselves to an impossible standard, which we will never meet. And we're always going to fall short. And so we have to, so I say to myself, I can be confident and make a mistake, competent and make a mistake. I can be competent and ask for help. I can be competent and not do everything perfectly. So I think it's also about us checking what are our standards for competence. And if they are in any way, shape, or form unreasonable, we need to sort of lower those.
Yeah. We are human and we are bound to make mistakes, like even the perfectionist. Firstly, you're in my lounge right now. And just had me thinking about feedback, receiving feedback. Can you just touch on the importance of feedback and how we can use feedback and criticism to actually project ourselves to the next level instead of shrinking back?
Sure. I mean, I will say this with 100% certainty. We will never reach our full potential if we don't get feedback. I'm going to say it again because it's that important. We will never reach our full potential if we don't get feedback. Because as humans, we all have blind spots. I heard this quote, I don't know where it's from, it's not mine, but I heard someone say, you can't look at a picture when you're standing in it. And so we are standing in the picture of ourselves every day. I'm too close to me to see everything. Luckily, I have a husband and he points out some things that I need to work on. So the people that are closest to us, which sometimes means colleagues, they see things about us that we do not see about ourselves. They experience us in a way that we can't see. And so that's why we have to get that feedback so that we can work on these things and do better. And I will say, even feedback is not always negative. Feedback can also be, what is it that I do well? Because we also sometimes don't even know what we do well, or we dismiss it. Somebody will say, oh, Ayanda, you're so good at strategic thinking. And you're like, it's nothing, like whatever, I can do it in my sleep. And a lot of us, we have been trained to focus on areas of weakness or development, and we totally dismiss areas of strength. So when you are going to get feedback, ask not only what could I have done better, but also ask, what did I do well? Because that's honestly, your areas of strength are your source of distinctiveness. 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to be distinctive in those areas that you are really, really weak in. But what I say to people that I've coached in the past is get your areas of development to a minimum bar and then focus on your strengths. And that's what's going to make you distinctive. Because I feel like we need people operating at a distinctive level. Imagine if all of us were operating at a distinctive level in the areas that we're strong in. You know what I mean? The world doesn't need people who are 5s and 6s in certain areas. We need everybody operating at a level 10 if we say that that's the highest level. So really look at it that way and think about how you leverage your strengths to address your areas of development. So for example, let's say you're not strong in Excel, and that's something that's really important in your job. But you are somebody who's very likable. People want to be around you. They want to support you. Leverage that relationship, leverage those people liking you, and get them to coach you on Excel. So try to find connections between the two. But like I said, get those weaknesses and areas of development up to a minimum bar, and then focus on distinguishing yourself through those areas of strength. But you got to get that feedback so that you can know what some of those areas are. And you can also take personality assessments. I've done exercises where you ask people who are close to you, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, ask them, hey, what do you think I'm really good at? And what do you think I need to work on? And that's another source of feedback, because trust me, they notice and they will tell you. I'll leave it at that.
Tobeka, if I may, just jump in quickly.
Jump in.
Thank you. I'm just thinking now, listening to Carice speak about imposter syndrome. And I mean, I think a lot of us have gone through it. Thank God I'm out of it. But like, have gone through it. And one thing I noticed, so I have a 10-year-old daughter, right? And I was reading up on some parenting stuff because, I mean, Google's your friend. I was reading up on some parenting stuff, and it says that you need to allow your child to give themselves validation. So instead of saying, I am so proud of you, you say, you must be so proud of yourself. And I started doing it, and my daughter just picked it up immediately. So every time she'd be like, oh my gosh, I did this, I did that. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, you must be so proud of yourself. And she'd be like, actually, I am. I really am. And I hope that this is one of the things that's going to help her later on in life not have imposter syndrome, because she won't need anybody else at work to tell her you're really good. As soon as she sees that, oh my gosh, I was actually good at this. Like you say, like for me, Excel is not my friend at all. But as soon as I do something that I figured out by myself, I'm like, oh, shucks, look at that. I got that all by myself, So, I mean, like I said, I'm only learning now as a parent how to give myself validation, which I wish I knew earlier on. Because it would have helped me. I probably wouldn't have gone through that time in my life. Well, I guess I needed it, but I wouldn't have gone through it. And I think that for us in this generation, raising kids or having kids in our space, whether it's a niece, a nephew, god kids, we just need to practice a different way of dating, our kids.
Yeah.
They don't grow up to be like us. And first 5 years, like your sister, Tobeka, first 5 years, you're still wondering, am I actually good at this? Meanwhile, you probably you're great at it. But, because you're waiting for somebody else to tell you that, oh, that was actually a good presentation. I do it now with myself. I tell people I kill presentations. Like at work, I kill presentations. I don't even play with them. I always say this. And people are like, oh, are you sure? I'm like, listen, even if I don't kill presentations, the minute I start a presentation in my mind, I'm just like, I got this. And it just flows, So yeah, it was just a thought that went through my mind. Thanks for letting me share that.
Ayanda, thanks for sharing that. I just wanted to add one thing to what you're saying, because there is a concept I talk in my book about called growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And that is based off of a book by a professor from Stanford University in the US. Her name is Carol Dweck, and she wrote this book called Mindset. And just really quickly, a growth mindset, a person is focused on progress, not so much focused on outcomes. They're willing to put themselves in uncomfortable situations in order to grow, versus a fixed mindset. This is a person who's focused on outcome, less so on progress or process. And they oftentimes don't want to put themselves in uncomfortable situations because they're worried, is my intelligence going to be questioned if I put myself in this situation and I don't do well? And one of the things she talks about in her book is learning how to praise kids' effort as opposed to outcomes. So she talks about, because you can always control your effort, you can't always control the outcome. And so getting people to be more focused on that as opposed to sometimes the outcomes, I think is also a healthy mindset for us to try to cultivate, in our kids too. Because like I said, you can't always control outcomes, but you can always control how much effort you put in.
Love that. It also kind of speaks to raising your internal value or your internal self worth and value. Before we speak on that, I'd just like to open the floor to Tato. you are welcome to ask your question to Carice. You can unmute yourself.
Awesome. Hi, Carice and Taweka. Thank you for the platform. So I am unemployed due to the retrenchment that took place where I worked last year. And my biggest struggle is the finance side of things in terms of my salary. So go to interview, they obviously tell you how much they'd like to pay you, etc. And then you show them your payslip from before and they say it's too high. I'm struggling with how do I say to them, which I've said to them that, okay, I'll take what you're giving me, but I'd like for it to be reviewed later on, for example, or, it's okay, I don't mind working hard to get to that point again. My feedback from some of the people that I've had interviews with is that, no, they don't feel my reasons of working there are adequate enough because of the money issue. And I'm struggling because it makes me also wonder about myself as a person. Again, I know you touched that, but how do you communicate that I work so hard to get this and to get this far and I deserve this, but it's fine, I can still work harder to get that if you can't give it to me now. I hope you understand what I'm saying, because it's working with whether are you good enough? Did they overpay you where you were working? Do you deserve this? So it makes you think so many things to a point where you just like, okay, I must just restructure my pay slip and just put it at like the lowest so I can at least get a job. But then again, it makes me feel like everything I work for, I work for nothing. So I just need, if you are able to guide in terms of just how you think and how you approach it as an individual. Hope you understand what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think I do understand what you're saying. I mean, and this kind of goes back to, I think, one of the first questions that Tobeka asked was, around, we have financial obligations, and sometimes, I mean, I clearly do not know your financial situation. So, if you feel like, look, this is what I'm worth, and I have enough money in the bank to support myself until I can find the right fit, then I think keep doing what you're doing. But if you feel like, look, these rands are running out, this account is just, it keeps just decreasing and decreasing, and I do have obligations, I think if people, are interviewing you and you're saying, okay, I'm okay with the salary that you're going to offer, but here's what my pay stub was before, and they can make a decision if they still want to make you an offer. So I think, that's how I would think about that. I don't know if there's necessarily a different way for you to approach things. If you're telling people, look, I'm willing to take the salary that you're offering, and they get scared away by your pay stub, I don't think you should change what your pay stub is, because then you just got to start asking yourself, is that the kind of company I want to work for, where, they're going to base their decision based solely off of this piece of paper and not the value that I bring to this particular organization. That's how I would think about it. I mean, because I like your approach, saying, hey, I'll take this salary, but can we review later? And if they're not open to that, then I think there's your answer, or you have to decide if you're willing to take what they're offering and realize that it's not necessarily forever. Maybe it's just temporary to stabilize your finances. And you can go somewhere else at a later time, maybe when the economy is a little bit better, when there's more jobs, and you could, make a different decision for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just come out of a similar situation where I got retrenched, but it was an immediate retrenchment. And on that evening, Ramaphosa announced lockdown. So I had to make quick decisions, and I decided to move back to my parents' house in KZN to save costs. But my parents were the champions in this, and linking what my father would say is an illustration you use in your book, Carice, of that 20 Rand note, right? So there's a YouTube video where it's like, here's a 20 Rand note. If I crumble it, how much is it? if I step on it, how much is it? And sometimes it can just feel like the situation right now with the mass retrenchments and the like, it doesn't take away your value. It hasn't decreased. That even if you take another job, you are still worth, like, just know you are still that 20 Rand and zeros and whatever else, so I'd actually wanted Carice to expand on that, but like I just wanted to encourage you. And like for me, my parents just said, don't settle. This is a temporary season. Don't give in to fear. Those are the things that I just wanted to encourage you in on that, just as an add-on to what Carice has also spoken about. Are there any other questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. And then just while we're waiting for people to raise their hands and ask questions, Carice, you speak on just going back to when you mentioned, if you need someone to coach you in Excel or whatever that skill that it is that you need assistance with. You also speak on mentors versus sponsors. What role do mentors and sponsors play? And just briefly, what is a difference? I know you extensively explain the difference in your book. And just, can you just expand on that?
So I say that, mentors are people who give you guidance. They will share their lessons learned from their journey. They'll share wisdom with you. A mentor can come from anywhere. It could be somebody from another company. It could be someone that's junior to you in your company that maybe has more years at that particular organization. They can kind of help you navigate that space. A sponsor has to be someone who is senior in your organization, who has what I like to call juice. They've got influence. They don't just have a title, they have juice. They are in the room when decisions about your career are being made. And what I realized is that some of the most important decisions in my career are being made when I'm not in the room. So those are decisions about promotions, bonuses, raises, step up opportunities. I'm not in the room. So I need the people who are in those rooms to be advocating for me, to want to put their name and their necks on the line for me and say, Carice should get that step up opportunity, and I'm going to provide the cover for her while she's doing it. So if she makes a mistake, I'm gonna be there to support her and walk her through it. And when we talk about a sponsor, I think it has to be somebody, who's in your line. You know what I mean? Or somebody, like I said, who's in that room. When I talk about in the line, I mean in the org chart, or somebody who's in that room who can really speak to the quality of your work. And what I've found is that most Black people are over mentored and under sponsored. We don't have those senior people pulling us up. And that's why a lot of times we get very frustrated, because we look at people who are not as smart as us, who are not as degreed, not as qualified as us, and they are climbing that ladder. And we're looking at them like, I'm way better than that person, but that person probably has sponsors. That person has somebody pulling them up, making sure they get that visibility, they get those right opportunities. And I just think we need to be thinking about who is in that sponsor group for us. And we need to have more than one sponsor, because what if that one sponsor we have leaves the organization? Then we're stuck. So I think it's just important for us to try to cultivate relationships with those kinds of people. If you have visibility with that person, make sure, you're showing up 100%, doing your very best work, because that's probably going to encourage that person to want to sponsor you. They'll be looking at, Tobeka like, wow, she's amazing. I could see her being the next, CEO of this company. I'm going to help her. I'm going to lift her up. I'm going to provide that cover and those opportunities for her. So if you don't have that visibility, try to figure out a way to get it. How can you get in front of that person? Can you volunteer for a project or some extracurricular activity that's happening in the office so you can get that visibility, so that person can see that you are a shining star, or a rising star. And then just make sure you are cultivating that relationship and thinking about not just what can I get, but what can I give? And it might not be one-to-one, right? Because that person might be so much more senior than you. But you can volunteer your time and say, hey, you know, Miss Senior Person at this company, I've got 5 extra hours this week. Can I help you on some project that I know you're working on? You know what I mean? Think about, can I send articles or things that you think that person might be interested in, right? Find ways to add that value and give to that person and not just get, because I think that helps sustain those relationships too. And that's with your mentors as well. But I think it's really, really important that we, you know, cultivate these relationships, because it is critical to us advancing in our organizations.
Just with that, what you're saying, it's almost like you are having some kind of a game plan, which kind of speaks to the differences between working in your career versus working on your career. Maybe if you can just explain to those who haven't read the book, obviously, the differences between the two and why it's important. Can you also just address the entrepreneurs that could be also on this virtual room?
Sure, absolutely. So in a previous life, I was a small business owner, and in the entrepreneurial world, we often use this phrase, working in your business versus working on your business. So for example, if I owned a biscuit shop, you know, working in my business is, okay, I'm buying my ingredients for my biscuits, I'm mixing up my biscuits, I'm baking them, I'm delivering them. Working on my business is taking a step back and saying, should I even be selling biscuits? Am I selling biscuits to the right people at the right price in the right place? You know, so it's asking yourself those larger questions. And what I realized one day is, wow, we could use that same language for corporate life. You know, am I working in my career, or am I working on my career? Am I working in my relationships, or am I working on my relationships? So when you talk about working in your career and your relationships, you know, it's like working in my career is, okay, I'm doing the things I need to do. I'm looking at my job description, I'm following through on my roles and responsibilities. Working in my career is taking a step back and saying, am I forming the right relationships? Am I developing at the right pace? Am I developing the right skills at the right time? You know, am I progressing the way that people expect me to for the amount of time that I've been in this organization, right? Working in my relationships is like, okay, if Tebecca's my manager, I'm talking to her about the deadlines and what needs to get done and what obstacles I'm running into and what resources I need. Working on my relationship is taking a step back and saying, hey, who is Tebecca? How are you? How are you doing? You're working from home. You know, what's your home work situation? Do you have children? Are you struggling with that? What keeps you up at night? Just understanding her as a person. So, you know, I say in the book, we need to bring Ubuntu to work. We talk about Ubuntu outside, you know, but when we come to work, we like, it's all business all the time. But I'm like, we need to start connecting with each other, because we are. We need to bring some of that to work. And we need to, you know, even now, you guys, like, set up a 15-minute Zoom chat, you know, or whatever application you use, right? To talk with your manager and say, let's just talk. Can we just grab a coffee? You bring a coffee, I'll bring a coffee. Let's just chat. How are you doing? A lot of times people don't even ask senior people how they're doing, because everybody just assumes, oh, well, you got a big office and all that money, you're doing fine. Like, I don't even need to ask. But everybody's got challenges. Everybody's got struggles. So trying to really connect with each other as people is really, really important. And so that's the difference between, you know, working in our relationships and careers and working on our relationships and careers. And it's important that we make sure we're doing both really well.
Great. I don't see any raised hands.
Tebecca, there's some questions in the Q&A. I'm seeing them now.
Ayanda, are you seeing anything? If you can perhaps read.
I see comments, but let me check if there's a question or two. All right. Will the recording be shared? Okay, no, we'll definitely share the recording. So Pumi is asking, can you request someone to be your sponsor, or does it happen organically?
So I'm going to answer this kind of two ways. I often say that, you know, mentorship can be requested, but sponsorship has to be earned. You know, so think about it, Pumi, if you are a really senior person in an organization, and if somebody walks up to you and says, will you be my sponsor? You're like, I don't know you. You know what I mean? Like, am I really going to put my neck, my reputation, my name on the line for a complete stranger? Probably not. But I do think if you have a proven track record, if you know, a senior person knows like, okay, Pumi is really hardworking, she's really a strategic thinker, she adds so much value, and you were to say to that person after you kind of established yourself, will you be my sponsor? They probably say yes. But you got to prove yourself to earn that sponsorship. No senior person is going to sponsor a complete stranger, because as humans, you know, we are looking out for our own self-interest, and we don't want to jeopardize our own reputation by sponsoring someone who's not going to live up to our expectations and who might embarrass us. So, you know, whether you do it before or after, you've got to prove yourself to a certain extent before someone would be comfortable sponsoring you.
Thanks, Carice. There's another question. Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce your name. I'll just read the question. So the question is, what's your take on loyalty? So the example is, I was offered an opportunity recently to move on to a different role within the organization, but I immediately felt the need to consider first what my boss would think of me if I moved without consulting him. I immediately thought that he would consider me ungrateful. My question is, where does the need to first receive affirmation from my boss when making career choices come from? Could it also be an upbringing thing?
I definitely think it can be, right? Because if you've grown up in a place where hierarchy matters, you know, you don't want to upset that more senior person, right? But I also think, you know, I think there's a certain level of common courtesy. And I think you should think about, you know, what state is my work in right now? You know, if I leave this team right now, is it going to leave a team in a really bad position? Can I offer to my boss to maybe juggle the two positions until he or she finds, you know, a replacement? Like, try not to leave people high and dry if you can, because remember, you're still in the same organization. And there's a quote in my book from this lady named Thokozile Mpupuni. She heads up group leadership and learning at APSA. She says, every person is a network. So you got to remember, you might not just be upsetting that boss. Because that boss is going to go and tell people how you behave and what you've done. And so you might be upsetting that person's whole network, right? So I think you just want to have, you know, a really adult conversation with your boss and say, look, I've really enjoyed the time that I've spent here. I've grown so much. I appreciate, you know, your contribution to my development, but this other opportunity, which really aligns with my development and where I want to take my career has come up, and I've been offered this, but I want to, you know, I'd like to discuss this with you. I'd like to discuss how I could make this work. You know, what does that look like? Come to the person with some ideas, you know, offer, like I said, maybe you want to try to juggle those two jobs until the person can find a replacement. Say, hey, I'll write my job description for you. You know, I'll sit on the interview panel. You know what I mean? Have a plan in terms of how you're going to help with that transition. Try not to just leave that person high and dry, because there could be ripple effects if you don't do it in the best way. I hope that's helpful and answers the question.
Thanks, Carice. That's it for the Q&A.
Oh, so we've come to a close. Carice, you mentioned it earlier, you know, growing up in an environment where your family pushed the importance of having a degree and qualification. I've come from that as well, where grandparents on mother's side, grandfather was a priest. On my father's side, both single parents. My father's side, grandmother was a maid. Parents are educators, so obviously they push get a degree, but they only ever worked in the public space. So we are first generational corporate people, and like just from your book, I mean, it's just right there in your face. Intelligence is not enough. Like our qualifications, although it is important, you do list it as something that, like you even mentioned, something that you still take into regard. What are the key things that you want Black professionals to take away? What is your hope that people come out of after reading your book?
So I've gotten this question before, and I would say it's really three things. I think number one, understand who you are as a person. Know your story, reflect on your values, your strengths, your traumas, knowing yourself, number one. Because I think we have a lot of leaders in the world who have unhealed traumas, and then they act out those traumas through the power that they have. And so you don't want to be that kind of a leader, right? You want to come to work as a whole healed person, and you want to make decisions and lead from that position of strength. I think that's number one. Number two is just understanding that success and impact require collaboration. If you all want to do anything that truly matters, that truly makes a difference, you will have to do it with other people. Because I know, like I was saying earlier, a lot of this advice that we've gotten is that, go out there and be excellent. Nobody ever tells you that excellence is not achieved in a vacuum. You're going to be excellent with, through, and for other people. And so learning how to build relationships, collaborate, work with, get over conflict with individuals is critical to you being successful and having the type of impact that you want to have. And then number three is just take ownership. I talk about this concept in my book too. Ownership is about you understanding and taking the bull by the horns. You know what I mean? And it's like I say in my book, you are the employee of corporation ABC, but you are the CEO of You Incorporated. And no CEO sits around waiting for answers or waiting for somebody to hold his or her hand. A CEO goes out, asks the right questions, uncovers the right options, and they make a decision. And so you all need to take ownership of your careers. Take ownership of your development. Ask for what it is that you need to develop. Don't wait on somebody to tell you what it is or to give it to you, because 9 times out of 10, people are worried about themselves. So you got to worry about yourself, so own your career, your relationships, your development, your work product, how you show up, how you communicate, really own that, and you have complete control over how you show up. I know there are a lot of things and systems that you don't have control over, but you have 100% control over this and how you show up. And so take that ownership, and just make sure, you are doing the things that you need to do to be successful and have impact in whatever space that's in, whether it's working for someone or working for yourself, but take that ownership and, do what needs to be done so that you can be successful and have the kind of impact that you want to have.
Thank you, Carice. Also, I lied. It wasn't the last question. Sorry. There's a question in the Q&A, which I do think it's important. I'll be sad if we missed it. Do forgive me for not reading out your name. I'm a typical Zulu Model C, so I apologize for not. I don't want to rip it apart. Out of respect for you. So the question is: I recently moved to a new job, and within 6 months, I got a promotion. I've been struggling to understand if it's because I'm good at what I do, or if it's because of my skin color. I guess I'm struggling with the imposter syndrome. What is the best way to deal with that? Essentially, how do you deal with feeling like you're a quota?
Yeah. And it's funny, I talk about this in my book too, right? Because there's a concept called Stereotype Threat, where we basically underrepresented groups, whatever that means, right? It could be women or people of color. We get into certain positions and we're so worried about showing up in a way that aligns with that stereotype, but that's how we end up showing up. And I really think this whole fear around, am I just a quota? For me, I'm like, look, you're in the job. Do the very best you can, regardless, because trust me, there are other people out here who've gotten jobs because they were not qualified. I'm going to leave that at that. But people have gotten jobs because they are not qualified. Do you think those people are sitting around saying like, oh, I shouldn't have this job, I'm not qualified? No, they are not. They are boldly standing in those positions. And I suggest we do the same. There's some reason you got it. Figure out a way to be as good as you can in that position, but don't lament for a second about how you got it, because you're in it. So do what you can with it, make the most of it. That is my advice to you. And look, pull other people in. You know, I think sometimes and this is something Sheryl Sandberg talks about in her book, Lean In. She says a woman will look at a job description, and if she can't do 99% of the job, she won't apply. A man will look at a job, and if he can do 60%, he's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and apply for this. Right. And think about it. If you get into a job where you can do everything already, there's no opportunity for you to grow in that role. There's no stretch. You know what I mean? So it's okay if you can't do everything, but figure out a way, get mentors, get a coach, you know, get somebody senior in the organization to usher you through it. Do whatever you need to do, right, to be successful, but take full advantage, 100% full advantage of this opportunity, because for whatever reason you're in it. So do what you can to maintain that and be successful in it.
Thank you so much, Carice. It's been such a pleasure for us to host you, and thank you for sharing your nuggets of knowledge. I do want to encourage everyone to get the book, Intelligence Isn't Enough. I've seen it in bookstores, it's on likes of Take-A-Lot. It's literally just Google.
It's everywhere, guys. It's everywhere. CNA. It's on sale, I think, on Loot.coza. Like Rebecca said, you can get it on Take-A-Lot. It's pretty much everywhere in South Africa. So please go grab a copy.
There's a woman's
or 10. Go grab 10 copies and give it to people.
Yes. Thank you, Carice. And then just to remind members that BMF Santon members, we have our AGM on Monday. Please do join in voting in a new MANCO. And the links have also been provided. Like, if you found this informative, we wish to bring more of these kind of sessions for you. So do join BMF so you can be part of the conversation, and together as we rise and we thrive as Black professionals in our career spaces. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.
You too. Thanks, Omega.
Thanks, everyone.